Good evening, ghoulies and ghosties and long-leggedy beasties. This is Alex, coming at you from the underworld, and welcome back to another episode of... Before we get started, I just want to say I hope everyone is doing well during the coronavirus scare, and if you're under the weather, I hope you feel better soon. And also, I know last weekend was Memorial Day weekend, so I hope you had a great Memorial Day. And as far as myself is concerned, I just sat around the house and watched TV, I read a little bit, and I did some knitting. And normally I like to cook out for a big group of people, but considering the coronavirus and all that good stuff, I just decided that it would be a bad idea this year, which that really sucks because I love to cook. And truth be it, I love to cook as much as I love reading horror. And actually, on that note, I can go in and segue into the book that I'm about to review for you, which this weekend I'm reviewing the graphic novel by Anthony Bourdain and Joel Rose called Hungry Ghost. And even though I advocate for people to get a book in whatever format they feel comfortable with, I really recommend for you to get the print edition of Hungry Ghost because the ebook edition doesn't have the 5 recipes in the back by Anthony Bourdain, nor does the ebook edition have the ghost glossary in the back, which is actually pretty vital to have along with some of the stories that are in this book. So, with that said, let's go in and see what these authors have whipped up for us with Hungry Ghost. Hungry Ghost by Anthony Bourdain and Joel Rose opens up introducing a ghastly narrator who is very similar to the infamous Crypt Keeper, which, by the way, this is the narrator on the front of the book here. And after she introduces herself, she asks if we're too afraid to play the game of 100 Candles. And from here, we jump over to New York, where we are introduced to this Russian billionaire, and he's recently won all of these chefs in a charity auction. So because of this, he's thrown a huge dinner party for all of his friends, and after everyone is finished eating, he invites the chefs to come in to have some cigars and cognac with him, and of course they accept. And as they're enjoying their cigars and drink, they understand he wants to play the game of 100 Candles, where they all tell ghost stories and blow out one candle after each story is told. So from here, all of the stories are tied together with the theme of food, and they feature Asian-style ghosts such as yokai, yuri, and abaki. And as the night becomes later, the room becomes darker and the stories become scarier. But little does the Russian billionaire know that death itself might crash his party. 100 Candles, or the Gathering of 100 Supernatural Tales, or the name that you see in the subtitle, is considered an ancient Japanese ritual that began during Japan's Edo period from the years of 1603 through 1868, a time when arts and culture thrived to their fullest. As for the ritual's purpose, it served as a test that allowed samurai to demonstrate their courage, because aside from telling scary stories in a dark room, some believe 100 Candles opens up doorways to the spirit world, which this is why after the 99th story, some would refuse to finish playing. If you're curious how to play 100 Candles, the rules are simple. All you need are 3 dark rooms, and you are supposed to start at the darkest hour of night. Also, you will need 100 candles, a mirror, and anywhere from 1 to 100 people. In the third room, set a mirror and 100 lit candles. Leave the second and first rooms dark. In the first room, gather your guests and take turns telling ghost stories. The scarier, the better. After each storyteller relays their tale, they must travel alone through the darkness of the second room and enter the third room where they are to blow out 1 candle. Once the candle is out, the storyteller must gaze into the mirror and return into the first room. Supposedly, after telling the 100th story, the spirit world is to bleed into our own where the evils that have been spoken of manifest for the storytellers. It had been urged not to play this game with weapons nearby. Also, if you do decide to play, keep a fire extinguisher handy, or simply use LED candles, as lit candles are not supposed to be left unattended. Fun facts. Here's a little bit of information on how Joel Rose and Anthony Bourdain collaborated on this book, and also there's a sad fact as well. In the author's note, Joel Rose said Anthony Bourdain was obsessed with stories like those collected in Hungry Ghost. However, Rose wasn't quite hooked until Bourdain's fandom eventually rubbed off. While selecting stories for this book, Rose referenced Lafcadio Hearn to gather inspiration, which, if you are unfamiliar with Hearn, he is most famously known for his work Quaidon, Stories and Studies of Strange Things. Now for a sad fact. Anthony Bourdain passed away from suicide in 2018. Hungry Ghost is dedicated to him. Before his passing, Bourdain and Rose agreed on the dedication to EC Comics, specifically for The Haunt of Fear, The Vault of Horror, and Tales from the Crypt. Now that we have that out of the way, it's time to move on to the spoilers section of this video, which if you haven't read Hungry Ghost, you might want to skip this section because I'm going to discuss some scenes that could ruin the experience for you. So if you wish to skip this, just scroll down to the comments section and you'll see that I have a comment pinned at the top with a timestamp in it. All you have to do is just click that timestamp and it will redirect you to the thoughts section of this video. Now, you only have 17 seconds to do this, so ready, set, go. Since everyone has had the opportunity to click away, I want to talk about 3 of my favorite stories in this book. And the first story I want to talk about is called The Salty Horse. Now, with this story, we're introduced to a wealthy man by the name of Don Harrow. And he has a very unnatural obsession for eating horses. And because of this, he ends up eating through his entire stable of nothing but young, prize-winning horses until there's nothing left but this old war horse. And of course, he wants to eat that too, but his chef tells him no, he doesn't want to eat that because it's going to be old and tough and the meat's going to be stringy and it's not going to be a pleasurable meal. Well, regardless, against this warning, Don Harrow has the horse slaughtered and he eats it. And after eating it, he goes and lays down in bed, and this is when the spirit of that particular horse comes to him. And after the confrontation between the two, he has a horse that burst out of him. And this kind of reminded me of the chest busters from Aliens. And also the way the imagery is done here, it reminds me of one of my favorite paintings that's called The Nightmare. And so it was really a treat to see how that imagery was respected in this story. So because of this being as ghastly as what it was, I would definitely have to say this is my favorite story in the book. But the next story I really enjoyed was called Deep. And this one really reminded me of a Bizarro story, but the tale really focuses on a renegade tyrannical chef by the name of Gaspard. And he asserts his toxic male dominance on the younger male chefs by raping them. And even though it's not detailed in the book, you know that's what he's doing. And as this is going on, you have a French Indo-Chinese chef who tells one of the younger chefs that people like Gaspard have a ball up their ass. And because of this, there's a spirit out there that's called a Kappa. And Kappas eat the balls that are up people's asses like Gaspard. And as soon as this information is relayed, the French Indo-Chinese chef turns into this turtle demon thing, and he runs over to Gaspard and shoves his claw up Gaspard's ass and yanks out the ball and eats it. And this was just something that felt random and weird, and I loved it because of it. And even though the story was a pain in the ass, it really did feel like there was some poetic justice here. Now, the third story that I really enjoyed was called Boil in the Belly, and the character of this does not have a name, but it is a young male chef who works at an Asian fusion restaurant, and he still lives with his parents and younger sister, and he cooks for them, and they're just this really happy family. And all of that changes one night because he starts to have some pain in his abdomen. And when they lift up his shirt, they see that there's a mouth that has grown on his stomach and it's demanding that they feed it. And so the mother starts feeding this additional mouth, and after an amount of time goes by, the boy starts to become just really in poor health and he gets close to dying. So his mother ends up calling a doctor, and the doctor says, well, your son has a hungry ghost in him. So the doctor comes over and he gives the boy a tonic, and after he drinks the tonic, the doctor like reaches in his ass and pulls out this snake long parasite, and they just hack it all up. And the parasite ends up moving along in all of its little parts. Like each part ends up getting a separate mind to itself, and it just scurries off for new host. And so that was something that was really creepy and really gory, and I just really love the originality of that story. And even though I've only listed 3 stories here as my favorites, there are some other stories that I really enjoyed as well, which I'll mention those in the thoughts section of this video. Unfortunately, the character development isn't really strong in this book, but it's enough where I can bitch about a few of the characters in the stories that I did enjoy. And the first character I want to bitch about is Don Harrow, because let me tell you about this greedy bastard here. I understand he's hungry enough to eat a horse, and at the end of the day, a horse is a horse, of course, but we are going through a time in this story where everyone has been struck with poverty. And my thing is, he eats his horses from eyeballs to balls. And if he is willing to eat some horse dick here, he can spare a few ribs to someone who's in need. And so it wasn't the fact that he was eating horses that pissed me off, it was the fact that he was just a greedy, selfish asshole. And even though the book doesn't describe how the horses are killed, I imagine it's no differently than any other farm livestock, but still, that's not something I would do. I would probably just end up becoming a vegetarian. So, moving on to the next character. Now, the next character I want to bitch about is Gaspard from the story The Deep. And with him, we see he is an asshole who totally asserts male dominance, but it's not just male dominance, it's toxic male dominance, because he achieves this by raping his younger male staff members. And at the end of the story, where you have the Ninja Turtle from hell who comes over and Freckle punches him and rips the ball out, I really felt it was poetic justice, I truly did. But then I said to myself, if you were walking around with a ball up your ass, would you also be a jerk? And I tend to think that if something was stuck up my ass, I might... You know what? Never mind. I wouldn't be angry about it. Let's just move on to another subject. The first time I read Hungry Ghost was in an ebook format, and I really did not feel like I got the bang for my buck. And that's because with the ebook, you do not have the ghost glossary at the end, such as what you have with the print edition. And because of this, some of the stories are so short, they just feel incomplete and random. And after I just kind of felt like the book was I ended up telling a few friends about it, and they said, well, if you get the print edition, it has like this whole guide in the back that can help you understand a little bit more. So I took their advice and I got the print edition and I reread it. And after reading the first story, I referenced the guide that was in the back. And of course, it did shine more light on the subject. And I did feel like it was more complete versus just reading the ebook edition. And with that said, though, some of the stories are still way too short, and I wish they would have been a little bit longer. And because of the small amount of page time that some of the stories are given, the character development suffers because there's no fleshing out of characters. But I did feel like maybe 2 or 3 of the stories did have a decent character development. I just wish it would have been more. And out of the stories in this book, they're all connected by a theme of food. However, the story The Snow Woman It's really in the book by a stretch. And what I mean by that is this is the only story that felt out of place because it really didn't focus on the subject of food. Yeah, at the beginning of the story, we have father and son who go hunting, and while they're out hunting, this is what leads to the downfall. But at the same time, it just really feels like they added that small element there just to make this story work. And I really feel like had this story not been in the book, it could have perhaps allowed more page time for the other tales that felt incomplete. Now, with griping aside, I will say there are more stories in this book that I enjoyed versus stories that I did not care for. And out of those stories, I really enjoyed Deep, I enjoyed Salty Horse, also there was Boil in the Belly, and I actually really did enjoy The Snow Woman. And stories that were okay were ones called The Pirates and The Heads. Those were okay. But The Starving Skeleton and Cowhead, those were just way too short for me to really be able to enjoy to its fullest. And I wish that those were the two stories that had been expanded more. But with that said, there are more stories in this book that are good versus bad. So because of this, I did enjoy the print edition. Overall, Hungry Ghost feels like a fun horror novelty, and I really enjoyed all of the artwork in the story. So the artwork was top-notch from beginning to end, and the stories, as I said, there's more good stories than there are bad stories, so for that reason, I would recommend this book. But just understand that some of the tales are so short they do feel a little incomplete, and the character development really isn't expanded like how I wish. But at the end of the day, it is something that I am happy to have. On to the questions. My first question is, what is a horror book that has a strong Asian folklore theme to it? Load up the comments. My second question is, what is a food that is so disgusting you would never try it? And feel free to list multiple foods here because I'm about to. My first food that I would never eat is frog legs. And the reason why is because I have a phobia in regards to frogs, and the idea of eating frog legs is just something that turns my stomach. It's something that'll never happen. My second food are brains of any type. I will not eat brains. And this comes about because with my great-grandparents, they had grown up through hard times and the Great Depression, and I had heard my great-grandmother had gained a taste for squirrel brains and fried eggs. And no, couldn't do it. I could do the eggs, but not the brains. No. And the next food that comes to mind are chitlins. And I've had friends tell me, oh, you should eat chitlins. They're so good. And I'm like, no, I just can't get past the idea. It just seems gross. And they're like, well, boiled chitlins really aren't that great. But if you have them fried, they're good. I'm like, I don't care. I'm not going to eat it. It's not going to happen. So those are the three foods that will never enter my mouth. And I'm interested to see what foods you are totally against trying, so load up the comments there. And with that said, it's time to close out the video, which I would like to thank Lisa G and Joseph Baylott for contributing to my Patreon account. If you would like to contribute to my Patreon as well, just go to the description section of this video, and you'll see I have a link there for my Patreon, which there's two tiers available. One is $5 a month, which that will give you a shout out at the end of my videos. And if you're a creator, I'll also note what it is that you do. And the second tier is $10 a month, which I'll give you that same shout out, but once a month I'll send you over one of my photos, which I do creepy photography on the side, so that's just a little bonus there. And if you can do this, that's great. If not, that's cool too. All I ask is that you continue to come to my channel to have fun. And if you would like to connect with me on social media, I have links for my Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram in the description section. And if you haven't subscribed to my videos yet, be sure to subscribe and hit that notifications bell because I have tons of more awesome book reviews coming in the near future. So until we see each other again, I hope you have a wonderful week and sweet nightmares.